How do you know which route to take? Well, you know, that decision-making process is not unlike examining the pros and cons of various treatment options. You gather a lot of data. How much is it going to cost? What emotional expenditures do we have to make? How much time do we have to invest in this? How do we fit both emotionally and physically into this process? Can we find a service provider for this route that we feel is a personal, comfortable match with us, somebody we want to work with? All of those things have to be taken into consideration.
Private agencies are state licensed, full service adoption agencies that provide counseling by social workers. And these social workers provide the counseling and support to all members of the adoption circle. Then that includes the prospective adoptive parents, the birth parents, and the adopted people as well. Typically they are not-for-profit, which means that they are mission-driven. Well, private agencies, the children are usually infant or newborn, and the children are available for adoption through the decision of a birth parents to decide on a plan of adoption for their child. There are several advantages of working with a private agency. One is that you'll have an opportunity to adopt a newborn who, by a decision of the birth parent, has voluntarily decided to make a plan of adoption for the child. They'll have an opportunity to have an ongoing relationship with the birth parents. You usually get training, education, and support during the entire process, and they might have the opportunity for post-placement services as well.
I think it's important that people understand the difference between independent adoption and agency adoption. In independent adoption, birth parents knowingly and voluntarily consent to the termination of their parental rights and the creation of parental rights in the adoptive parents. It is indeed a private, a personal, and independent arrangement. Now, in agency adoption, on the other hand, birth parents relinquish their parental rights to a licensed child welfare agency. The agency then places the child with the adoptive parents. In terms of how they are alike and how they are different, one of the reasons that independent adoption tends to be more popular than it was in the past is that in many ways it eliminates some of the restrictions. For example, in independent adoption, there usually aren't any restrictions on the age of the adoptive parents, their religion, their background. It is an option for same-sex couples, for example. Agency adoption, depending upon the agency, may have restrictions on some of those factors. The way that birth parents and adoptive parents link together is pretty creative. People have done their own advertising, they've done word of mouth, they've talked through friends. On occasion, they've worked with facilitators and others. One of the things that I frequently forewarn my clients about is the fact that the maker of the match, meaning that person or entity that links them, needs to be somebody or something that is regulated, controlled, and experienced. One of the problems with facilitators is that many of them can be very good, but there is no professional regulation, there are no requirements about educational background, and in many instances there's the giving of completely and utterly incorrect legal advice. So I caution people to look to the best adoption professionals you can find, the best adoption lawyers, the most experienced adoption agencies.
What is open adoption? Well, open adoption has many meanings to many people. I think of it on a continuum, with the most open end being what I call a fully disclosed open adoption, which means that there's direct contact between the birth family members and the adoptive family, and the child is included in this contact. And by direct contact, I simply mean that it may involve face-to-face meetings, it may involve phone calls, emails, letters, pictures, but the contact is not mediated by anyone else. They know how to get in touch with each other, and they do that directly. Another kind of level of openness is what we've called mediated adoptions, which mean adoptions in which there is indirect contact. It means there's contact that happens through a third party. So for example, and this is typically, this role is typically played by someone at the adoption agency. So let's say that a birth mother decides that she wants to send a birthday card to the child. She might send the card, write out the card, send it to the agency because she doesn't know the name of the family where the child is living. She sends it to the caseworker at the agency, who then takes her name off of it and forwards it on to the adoptive family, and then the adoptive family can correspond, also through the agency. So those we call mediated or semi-open adoptions. And then there are confidential adoptions in which there's basically no contact, no direct contact at all between the adoptive family and birth family members.
I think that families who adopt internationally are typically families who don't mind the extra scrutiny, the extra attention that comes along with having a child that doesn't look quite like you. These are typically families who really want to adopt a child who needs them, who has very little chance in their birth country of being raised in a family. Often the families we see are families who've done a lot of international travel, who've worked in other countries, in Peace Corps or other volunteer experiences, and are very comfortable with different cultures and sort of a worldview. And these families make very successful internationally adoptive parents. We also see families who've never gone out of the state that they live in. And they do very well because they're interested in the culture and they're willing to do the research and the information necessary to figure out if this is something they're comfortable with, and whether or not they can truly enjoy visiting another country and learning about it, and then helping their child to feel really good about that culture, and then incorporating it in with their family traditions as well.
One of the things that people might want to consider as they think about adoption is that if one of the factors is price and money, think seriously about the fact that there are all kinds of kids who are already born who are available for adoption, wherein there are no fees, and in fact there may even be an adoption subsidy available. In those kinds of adoptions through the foster care system in each and every state in the United States, there are indeed agencies involved. There certainly are some restrictions, but there is indeed a way for people to adopt.